I know you're out there. I know that you're afraid. You're afraid of us. You're afraid of change. I don't know the future. I didn't come here to tell you how this is going to end. I came here to tell you how it's going to begin. I'm going to hang up this phone, and then I'm going to show these people what you don't want them to see. A world without rules and controls, without borders or boundaries. A world where anything is possible. Where we go from there is a choice I leave to you.
The KrisAnne Hall Show.
Any varmint that crosses that lady's path has met its match. Come on!
Rise and shine, liberty-loving patriots. Welcome to the KrisAnne Hall Show. KrisAnne Hall here, KrisAnnehall.com. So did you watch the debates? How many of the candidates were willing to put liberty over security, principle over party, and truth over their favorite personality? I have to ask you because I didn't watch the debates. We don't have television. We don't have cable. We don't have satellite. Everything that we watch is because we choose to watch it, and we take the effort to get it through the internet. We have not had cable or satellite since 1998. Crazy, huh? Imagine. But you couldn't live stream the debate. I really wasn't going to watch it to determine who I was going to vote for president. It was merely entertainment value. I wanted to see what was going to happen with Trump, and I understand that there was a concerted effort to shut him down. And I saw Todd Starnes this morning on Facebook tell us one of the most ridiculous questions to Scott Walker. So, I told you, this is all a setup. It's all going to be ridiculous. They've chosen who they're going to pick. They're going to target who they want to win. They're going to target who they do not want to win. And they're not going to give people a fair share. That's the way the private corporate club is going to run their debates. I think the most shocking thing that I saw was the fact that people were complaining that the Fox moderators were rude and snarky and just simply unprofessional. And so you see, this is set up to be an adversarial, media-run, sensationalized event rather than a real, true debate where you have real questions, you get real answers, and you get real solutions. But while our country, most of our country, was absolutely enthralled and mesmerized by the presidential debate, which is a total setup, farce, and falsity, a false hope in electing presidents. Everybody in the system knows that the president is a false hope. The president's not going to fix anything. If we really, really think that changing out the occupant of the White House is going to change anything about how our country operates, we don't know what our real problem is. If we want to get to real solutions, because our federal government is so far out of control, it is not going to fix itself, and you're not going to elect anyone who's going to be able to fix it. Okay? And so here's the problem. If we want to fix this problem, the solution is not federal, the solution is local. And while most of America was absolutely mesmerized and pulled into this fake presidential debate, there were patriots in Idaho doing what patriots ought to be doing, activating on the local level to preserve life, liberty, and property. And today, you have heard the last on my show of this presidential debate. That's it. We're not talking anymore about the presidential debate on this show. No, we're going to talk about real solutions. Real people doing real things to really fix the problems with the federal government. I have an interview with Representative Matt Shea from Washington, D.C. and Representative Matt Shea and the Representative Representative Heather Scott in Idaho have activated patriots in Idaho to preserve, yes, one man's life, liberty, and property. Because our power is local America. Our power is on the individual basis, neighborhood to neighborhood, house to house, individual to individual. Because you see, the federal government is nothing but a schoolyard bully. All bark and no bite. All their power is exerted upon the individual, which strikes fear in the masses. And if the people in the community stood by the individual the way Matt Shea, Heather Scott, and the people of the communities of Washington and Idaho, then the federal government would have no power at all. They rely on the fear that they invoke in the hearts of the people. They rely on the co-opting of local government and local law enforcement. That's the only way they can enforce their tyrannical regulations. And when you take that away from them, they are powerless. They are left with no power, they are left with no mechanism, and you see that the emperor has no clothes. And so what we're going to do today is have this interview with Matt Shea so we can learn the real power that we have, and it is not in who we elect for president. The real power that we have is in the spirit of American liberty and our ability to unite in that spirit. Thomas Paine said it's not in numbers that we gather our strength, but in unity. And Heather Scott and Matt Shea proved that yesterday, while everyone was anticipating and buzzing about a fake presidential debate. These patriots were living up to the American spirit. I have with me Representative Matt Shea from the great state of Washington. Matt, you are coming back from Idaho. Where in Idaho?
Priest River, Idaho. I'm actually coming back into Washington right now as we speak, talking on speakerphone. It's an amazing situation that developed up here in Priest River, Idaho. Representative Heather Scott, a great patriot. For those of you that aren't familiar with that name, you should remember it because she is doing a great job over in Idaho defending the Constitution and freedom and liberty. Representative Scott called me yesterday and alerted me to a situation that was going on up here with a local veteran who had received a letter on July 30th from the Veterans Administration that said a doctor had judged him incompetent, and because he is incompetent, that he no longer, under the Brady law, has the ability to possess firearms or ammunition. He can't have them in his house. He can't own them. He can't possess them, etc.
So, Matt, this was just a doctor's decision. It wasn't even a court. There was no due process. There was nothing. Just some doctor wrote down in a report.
There's no due process whatsoever. This veteran, Vietnam veteran, had 8 months ago a stroke. The doctor said at that time he was not capable of handling his financial affairs. The doctor never followed up with him. He's walking around. He had a cane. He came out as we were all there at his house. He came outside. He was rattling off phone numbers from memory. He had his checkbook. So this guy is totally competent. And to add insult to injury, the doctor never followed up to figure out that he actually is a very competent, well-functioning human being. And on top of that, the VA made this determination and allowed him no chance at appeal. None. They just made this determination and said you can't any longer possess a firearm. Instead of what, if it was true due process, saying something like, this is a proposed determination and allowing him a chance to appeal, so his right to bear arms is not affected, among others, including the Fourth Amendment.
You know, I'm concerned that an agency can remove someone's fundamental, inalienable right to keep and bear arms. I'm concerned even with an appeal about an agency elected by no one having that kind of authority. Let me ask you, Matt, so this wasn't just a letter, though. They actually told him they were coming over, right?
Well, yeah, that's exactly what happened. I completely agree with you, KrisAnne. This is bureaucratic terrorism. You literally have bureaucrats making these determinations on whether somebody should lose their liberty, their property, without any sort of official adjudication in a court of law. It's absolutely ridiculous. So the VA had a field examiner call this guy and say, we're coming out. And then a veteran service officer from Bonner County also said they were coming out. And this guy at that point says, well, if you guys are coming out and it says I can't possess a firearm and you're coming to my house, I can't trust that you're going to not report that I have firearms here back to law enforcement and end up with a confiscation. And so that's what happened. Representative Scott called us. We had patriots literally from Washington, Idaho, and Montana organize in 12 hours and arrive on site in Priest River, Idaho, and stand in front of this man's door and say, you're not coming in here. You can do any meeting that you need to do outside. You're not confiscating this guy's firearms. And to his credit, Sheriff Darrell Wheeler of Bonner County stood with the people and for the Constitution and said, nope, not in my county.
That's awesome, Matt, because I was going to ask you about the sheriff. I saw him in your Periscope video, and I was going to ask you, was he just there to keep peace, or was he there to maintain that man's liberty and property as well?
She actually came up on the steps of the church that we were speaking in front of, and he said, I am here to protect this man's right to bear arms. No bureaucracy is going to take his constitutional right to bear arms. The only way that can happen is through the court and through the court of law.
Woohoo! Yay!
Yeah,
I'm excited about that. You know what else I'm excited about, Matt? I'm excited that the people came together. And you know, I know you believe this and preach this too, but local government and local action is where we have our power, and that's where we have our authority. That's where we need to come together. And I think what you guys showed, you and Representative Scott, was that we can protect people on an individual basis and make a huge impact in the state and federal levels.
Absolutely.
KrisAnne Hall Show. She's Liberty's lobbyist.
No presidential debate chatter. No ridiculous assumptions about who will be our next king. Just real live Americans exercising their real live God-given inalienable rights in the protection and the security of the life and the liberty and the property of their neighbor. That's where we have our power. That's what Matt Shea and Heather Scott organized the people to do. And that's exactly what happened. We'll continue with our interview now.
And it's really interesting. The tone completely changed. Everybody's nice. Oh, we didn't want to seize his firearms or confiscate his firearms. Everything's great. We're going to work with him to resolve this and get him declared competent again. And suddenly, everything's good. And the reason that is because the people showed up and the people were watching and the people were listening and were willing literally to stand between the federal government and this veteran. And the sheriff was willing to do the same. It's amazing. It was all peacefully. And it looks like everything is going to be taken care of for this great veteran that served our country.
Well, you know what's amazing, Matt, is it just goes to show some things that you and I have been saying, that the federal government is just a big schoolyard bully, and they don't have the manpower, they don't have the resources to hold to their threats. They rely on co-opting the local governments and the local people to do their dirty work for them, but when the people refuse, then they are powerless, and we have reasserted our power over our rights.
Absolutely. It's the Achilles heel of the federal government. And, I mean, imagine this. This guy had a stroke, and you send him a letter creating all kinds of stress in his life. The guy didn't even sleep last night. Creating all this stress in his life. Is that really good for him? Is that what government's supposed to do? No, absolutely not. They're supposed to serve that veteran. They're supposed to protect our constitutional rights and our God-given unalienable rights, life, liberty, property, and the ability to defend the same. And I misspoke. It's not our constitutional rights. It's our God-given rights protected by the Constitution.
I knew what you meant, Matt, but I know that you know the difference, and so many people don't know the difference. You know, you had told me that there were some people that weren't very nice to Representative Scott. Can you tell us about that?
There were some people that, well, there were a couple. There were some people that were saying that this is not that big of a deal. This is that blown out of proportion. And I got to tell you something, KrisAnne. It's that head in the sand mentality that's the reason we are at where we are at in this country. It is that reason. We have to quit saying that the federal government's got our best interest in mind. They have proven time and time again they don't. Well, Representative Scott spoke today with, I believe it was Veteran Service Officer, the head Veteran Service Officer for the state of Idaho, who said if this guy is worried about his guns, then he shouldn't wear one on his hip to the meeting and should get the guns out of his house. So to me, that implies that if the guns are there, or if he was wearing one on his hip, that somehow either there would be a confiscation that would occur there, or there will be a report to law enforcement for confiscation later. And I can't take that any other way. I don't see who could.
Now, Scott, Matt, I just want to make sure that the people who are listening understand that Idaho is a constitutional carry state. You can open carry on your hip, right?
Yes, you can. And many people were today in front of this good man's house.
So him carrying something on his a firearm in his hip is fully within the lines of the law of the state of Idaho. I understand it's fully within our inalienable rights and should be protected by the government, but we're confused about those things these days. But Idaho actually has a law that says you can do that. So what this representative of the VA was simply saying is, we're going to find this man guilty of a crime that will take his inalienable rights, and the crime is simply having a medical condition.
That's exactly right. And on top of that, this other state-level bureaucrat that spoke to the representative today was extremely arrogant. There's a phone, this phone call apparently was recorded. This guy was extremely arrogant and treating the representative very terribly when, wait a minute, this is a state representative representing thousands of people, and you're the bureaucrat that's supposed to be serving them. Why are you acting like that? And that I think is just a picture of the way the bureaucrats are acting across this country, and one of the biggest problems we have here in America.
Well, it's right, because we have, Congress has delegated to them the power to make law via regulation and to execute laws via enforcement. And these people, Matt, are elected by no one, so they have absolutely no accountability and no way for the people to remove their consent over these, as you called them, tyrannical bureaucrats. And this is how we do that, Matt. I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of Representative Heather Scott. I'm so proud of the people who came together and said, we're not going to be ruled and reigned by federal bureaucrats. We are a people who are a free men in a constitutional republic, and we are going to hold these people accountable.
And I guarantee you, KrisAnne, if those patriots had not been there today, this situation would have ended completely different.
Don't let them break your stride. There is light on the other side. You'll see all the raindrops falling me. It's a revolution.
The KrisAnne Hall Show. She's Liberty's lobbyist.
Wow, the power of the people coming together, united. They didn't have to have 4,000. They didn't have to have 400. They simply had to be united. This man being deprived of his liberty and of his property by arbitrary bureaucrats elected by no one. And this is the response of liberty-loving people. I'm so encouraged and empowered by this. This is what we have, America. This is who we are. This is the spirit that created our Declaration of Independence, our Constitution, and our Bill of Rights. This is America. People standing shoulder to shoulder in the face of tyranny, knowing what is right and what is true and what is liberty, and saying no. We won't tolerate anything less. This is what we have, America. This is who we are. And Matt Shea and I are going to change subjects here a little bit. We're going to talk about this tax revolt, this legal tax revolt, because this is so applicable here. You see what could happen if we joined hands, community, neighbor and neighbor. The federal government would be completely disarmed, both literally and figuratively, if we were just to come together. So here's our interview again.
That's the power of the people, Matt. And this is something that's going to have to be really important to us coming up soon, because I'm going to tell you what, there's a really big movement, and I don't know if you're seeing this yet, of people who are wanting to begin a mild tax revolt over the funding of Planned Parenthood, in which they're going to go to their personnel offices and file maximum dependence on their W-2s, so no taxes will be taken out of their checks on a weekly basis. And so that way the government will have to operate only on the funds that it will receive on April 15th, and we will cut off the constant flow. Now this is going to cause kickback to individuals from the IRS, and we're going to need patriots to come together and support our legal right to claim maximum dependent.
That is a very, very encouraging development. I think that we need to talk about this, that we will not fund what is essentially what Dr. Mengele did in Germany. We aren't going to fund that. We're Americans. We've had enough. And by the way, Planned Parenthood has been sued in several states for Medicaid fraud, which, as I understand, is still being investigated. So we've got not only an organization that does some horrific things, selling body parts of little babies, the kid most innocent among us, but on top of that, they may be defrauding taxpayers. It is time that we had governors and attorney generals investigate Planned Parenthood. We actually sent a letter to our governor and attorney general here in Washington, and they stood by Planned Parenthood. And if they're not going to do that, then that funding needs to be taken away. And I love the strategy you're actually talking about. We're just not going to pay it. Because too often they're using this money against us.
Well, and it's crazy because the Senate did a sort of, funny little mock vote, and videos with people crunching into baby skulls, vacuuming brains, laughing about parts, and selling them off was not horrendous enough for the Senate to want to defund, at least in part, Planned Parenthood. And even worse, Congress felt it would be better to go on vacation than to deal with this. You know just as well as I do, Matt, that Congress could have temporarily defunded Planned Parenthood until after the vacation and until after they did sufficient investigation. They've done this before on minor things. They could do it on this. And the way we're seeing it, Matt, is if this is not horrendous enough, barbaric and vicious enough for Congress to get off their tails and do something about it, nothing ever will be. And it's going to take this legal revolt by the people to get somebody's attention.
Well, clearly Republican leadership is not listening. Clearly there are some Republicans who aren't listening. And if to nothing else, just to conscience and common decency, my goodness. I talked about this in caucus in Olympia, and I said that we're talking about the systematic destruction of our fellow human beings. We will be judged in the lens of history for how we stood on this issue right now. And we better be on the record on this issue as opposing it, and we better do everything we can to defund Planned Parenthood and stop abortion in America. And still, we had Republicans that were worried about getting reelected, and that ultimately is the problem. And you're right. The people are going to have to take the power back. The people are the ones that are going to have to do this. and I'm here to support them in whatever way I can and to support you, KrisAnne, with everything you're doing in the fight for freedom and liberty.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Matt. I want to thank you for your willingness to move outside your state. Not like physically move, but to get active outside your state and encourage other people. I talk about you everywhere I go, especially when I give my state sovereignty class, and the center. I forgot the name. Tom DeWeese's
Center for Self-Government, American Policy Center.
American Policy Center is also bragging on you, and they're using your plan that you're doing there in Washington to bring liberty back into legislation as a plan to mirror throughout the states. And so I want you to know, Matt, that there are patriots all over this country that are standing behind you. I saw your note on Facebook to pray for you, and I want you to know that we are praying all the time for you and for the efforts of liberty in Washington.
Thank you, KrisAnne, and God bless you, and it's all for the glory and honor and praise of God. And I really appreciate everything you're doing. Thank you for having me on.
How do we get in touch with you, Matt? How do we get in touch with Heather Scott?
The quickest way is on Facebook. Heather Scott's Facebook page is actually linked from mine, and you can just look up Matthew Shea. You can go to VoteShea, SHEA.com, and there's links to the Facebook pages there as well. It's the quickest way to get a hold of me. And, I think, just as one final thought, this sends a message to the whole country that if you take the guns of one of us, you take the guns of all of us, and we're not going to let that happen.
Well, I think that's a beautiful note to end on there. God bless you, Matt, and I will be in touch about this tax revolt.
God bless. Take care, KrisAnne. Thanks again.
I want you to understand the power that we have. I want you to understand the hope that this should give. This is Priest River, Idaho, and we have learned something today. The veteran's name is John Arnold. He received a letter on July 30th telling him the Veterans Affairs representatives were going to come and take his guns. Do you know why? Because somebody checked a box. But the VA said that due to the paperwork, this veteran was no longer allowed to buy, sell, or possess firearms. I want you to hear this. The VA, not a court, not a jury, the VA, a bureaucrat, based upon a checked box, determined that this man could not possess firearms, cannot buy, sell, or possess. I bet that if he went down to the local gun shop and tried to buy a gun, they would not let him do that. Because a box checked on his paperwork, and the VA says. They threatened to come to his home yesterday and seize his guns. And the community came together to support him. Can you believe? I'm looking at pictures of this. I was watching this on Periscope. If you don't know what Periscope is, you've got to get Periscope. It is live streaming video. You can follow me at KrisAnne Hall. You can follow Matt Shea at Rep Matt Shea. You can see what's happening on the grass. This is grassroots. Presidential elections are not grassroots. Presidential elections are monarchies and aristocracies putting on a pomp and circumstance show to keep the masses entertained. This is grassroots. And I'm looking at the picture, and I'm telling you, there's probably just 50 people tops there. And the federal government changed their tune because 50 people surrounded a man's house, because the local sheriff said, not on my watch, not in my community. I think we should thank that sheriff of Bonner County, Idaho. Thank him for taking that stand for this man's rights, fulfilling his oath. Oh, well, we shouldn't have to thank him for fulfilling his oath. That's his job. You know what? There are so many who would have just simply said, well, they're the feds. I just have to follow the law. I'm not here to determine what's right or what's wrong. I just have to follow the law. And this sheriff of Bonner County, Idaho, Sheriff Darrell Wheeler, needs to be commended for doing what he's supposed to do, when so many would not. You can find him at bonnerso.org. And I think that we should, the Liberty First Brigade, should write a letter to Darrell Wheeler and say thank you, Darrell Wheeler, for being a constitutional sheriff and standing with your citizens to defend the life, the liberty, the property of this veteran, John Arnold. Can you imagine being told that the VA was coming to take your guns? I don't think that this would have ended very well. I think this man would have been committed to keeping his life, his liberty, his property. He fought in a war so that we could secure those rights for ourselves and for our children. And how does the federal government repay him? By wanting to strip him of those rights arbitrarily, by bureaucrats elected by no one, denying him his due process, denying him his liberty. This is offensive to the spirit of liberty. You know what? I find this more offensive than a Confederate flag when the government is taking our liberty, and the American spirit should rise up and push back.
The weapon of my choice, don't censor my voice. Hate me if you won't, or love me if you can. If the truth is what you want, then you found your man. I ain't backing down, I ain't backing up. If you think like I think, then crank it on up. I won't back up, I don't back down. I've been raised up to stand my ground. Take my job, but not my guns. Tax my check till I ain't got none, except for the good Lord up above. I answer to no one.
The KrisAnne Hall Show. She's Liberty's lobbyist.
So America, what you gonna do? Are we the people gonna continue to be played by the bread and circuses? There's a sucker born every day. Will the American people be that sucker? Or will we do what we have to do? In the spirit of liberty, in the spirit of who we are, and stand in defense of each other, community to community, person to person, state to state. You want to fix this problem of our federal government? You need to do it together, or we'll do it alone. Remember, Benjamin Franklin said, "We'll hang together, or we'll hang separate, but we'll surely hang." That's what's happening, America. He wasn't talking about the fact that they were taking a stand and they would be hung. I mean, that was obvious. He was saying, look, we either stand together now, or we don't stand at all. And if we don't stand, we're hung anyway. Because when the government has this unlimited power, then there is absolutely nothing sacred, nothing special, nothing reserved to the people. And we are left to be nothing but tributary slaves. You want to do what's right. Get your neighborhood together and say, we'll stand with this guy. We're not going to allow the federal government take his property. We don't need the entire country. Stop believing that lie. That is the lie of the bully that tells you, oh, well, we can't do this unless we have 3 million people. We can't do this unless we get 3/4 of the population. That is a big, fat lie. And the only purpose of that big, fat lie is to keep you enslaved. Every power of every revolt throughout history has been perpetrated on the local level by the local people in small numbers. Look at, you know what I think about the Bishop Wars in the between 1628 and 1642, started by a beautiful woman by the name of Jenny Geddes, who got so sick and tired of the government dictating to her church what her church could not and could do, listening to the king's rhetoric from the pulpit. She stands up in the middle of church and throws her pulpit at the priest or the pastor, screaming things about hirelings and men loving idolatry instead of God. One woman, sick and tired of government control over her church, started an entire revolution throughout an entire kingdom. Jenny Geddes started a revolt within her church that spilled out into her streets, that spread throughout her community and spread throughout her kingdom, and resulted in the hanging, actually the chopping off of the heads of Charles I, the tyrannical king of that day. Opening the eyes of the people. One woman, James Otis Jr., our framers call him the midwife to liberty. One man standing in February of 1761 and saying, no, we will not allow the government deny us our due process. We will not allow the government to search and seize by arbitrary agents. We will not tolerate arbitrary power in the hands of individual agents. We will not tolerate this anymore. Consequences be as they may, I will stand alone against this. And he found out that he didn't have to stand alone. And the entire American Revolution was birthed in February of 1761 because one man said no more. America, that's who we are. That is our spirit. And we should be offended by anything less. Our politicians are sold out to idolatry. They'd rather have babies murdered than stand for liberty. It's time for us to stand individually, America. We are the light. It's time to shine. God bless. See you tomorrow.